nowadays in terms of the culture, depending on where you grow up. Like it's probably in the middle of the Bible Belt, it's still pretty shocking or weird.
It's
I
not
don't.
as
You
bad
tell
as
me.
it's dramatically different. It's not where it should be, but it's dramatically different. And I don't know that I would call it cool or chic. I would just say that gay people are uh, awesome, and that chicness that you think it is really just being fabulous. I mean, that's just what being fabulous entails.
Okay. No, I just mean in terms of like, because that
It's
was
general.
actually, yeah, I know, I got you. Just because, like, I don't know, that was already starting to happen when I was in college. See, the thing with me that's probably different than most Christians is I was a theater major in college and I grew up in New York. So, if you're a theater major, you know gay people constantly. Constant. Every theater class I've ever taken had at least three out of seven guys, three of them would be gay. At least,
It is.
you know.
It is no coincidence that as as society is more accepting towards uh, the LGBTQ community, religion has taken a nosedive. They're correlated, and for a very good reason. And the reason is because of what you just said. Everyone now that has friends has a gay friend. I will guarantee you that. Now, yes, there will be some people that don't, but we all know them now. We are out. You know, we're not hiding anymore, and that forces people to make a choice, whether it be consciously or subconsciously, that you either have to be willing to shun this person, this uh, person that you either love or you love as a friend. They've been there for you the entire time, or take a step back from the thing that's telling you to shun that person. And overwhelmingly, society as a whole has chosen that they're not going to do that, and that's put a big dent in religion. I mean, if I think things would be different, a lot different in society, the world, if religion had not beaten that drum and been more open to homosexuals being a part of the church, feeling like they were included, and not like they were some, um, gross stain on society. That doing that right there, I think in the long run, it really cost the church, because if you might have a different world if they would have opened up those doors like they claim they do, and you might have 10 times more Christians now if that would have been the case. But I think because you know they made that a hill they wanted to die on, it really, really, really uh, cost them.
Well, they made it a hill they want to die on. That's probably. I think what you're saying is because it wasn't just someone who was gay like you. It was, then there was three people probably who grew up Christian, like maybe someone like Dan or something, who who couldn't take the church's attitude on gay people because they knew gay people. So it's not that they necessarily would have chosen. It's that you're saying that the church itself forced them to make a choice. Is that what I'm
Correct.
hearing? Is that
And I'm saying that like the numbers and statistics show that um, religion as a whole, people who identify as non-religious are increasing. So that religion is decreasing as acceptance to same-sex relationships is increasing at a dramatic rate. So what I'm saying is, if the church had actually followed its teaching, and that is love your neighbor as you love yourself, treat others the way that you want to be treated, and not made a push to ostracize gay people or to make them feel like they were an abomination or to make them feel like they needed to change. If they'd have opened those doors and said, you know what, you might be gay. It was a law back in the Old Testament, just like wearing mixed linen and eating shrimp. There's no difference. You can still eat shrimp now. You can still wear mixed linens now. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to fall in love with whoever you want to. I think that the religiosity in America would be stable, if not increasing, because families are tied to churches, and who doesn't want to still be included in that community? But because the church came out and doubled down on the abominations, doubled down on the talk where it's a sin and it's just abhorrent to God, that forced people to
make
right.
the people, because a lot of what you're, if I'm hearing you correctly, and I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying, that as it plays out in the general population, not that many people have a dog in the fight one way or the other. What I heard from someone like your friend Steve is he might not necessarily have had a dog in the fight had the church not taken a firm dogmatic stand on the subject of homosexuality.
Absolutely.
A lot of people, what's that?
Absolutely.
Then a lot of in-between Christians would have had no real reason to, choose sides against Christianity. That's
Absolutely.
kind of what you mean, right?
That's dead on. There's a preacher. There's an African American preacher that I think his name's D. I cannot remember for the life of me, but he's on YouTube. If you Google, I believe it's African American preacher preaches about being gay from the pulpit. This is a Southern black pastor in front of his congregation, getting up there and just letting loose, kind of what I just said about the hypocrisy and what it's done to the church by their decision on how to handle that. And he says everything just perfectly. I mean, just perfectly about why the situation with people in religion is in the shape that it's in today. And that's because we pick and choose which rules we want to follow based on which ones make us comfortable. Same-sex relationships made the elders back there, for whatever reason, uncomfortable. So they decided that was going to be an all or nothing for them. And for a long time, it was the dominant ideology. And then slowly but surely, as science began to, just exponentially learn the answers to things, that loosened those cracks, I believe, for the dam to come falling down, which was the look at it this way. Look at the DOMA Act, the Defense of Marriage Act in George W. Bush. It wasn't 6 years later that when the DOMA was passed, it was by like a 55% margin. Like 55% of the country voted to keep marriage between a man and a woman. I believe the number was 55%, if I'm not mistaken. Within 6 years, that number had not only flipped, but it increased. And why is that? Well,
that's because of the popular culture. A lot of people have pointed this out, and I think this is really astute, that conservatives have won political battles, and they've doubled down on, the reason why the religious right grew is because the politics behind it, and they got good at the localized politics. But the people on the left and people who would want to make more tolerant attitudes towards homosexuality control the culture. They're Hollywood, they control what we watch, and what movies we go to. And that's really what makes the difference, because you put in, it's like if you saw 13 Reasons Why, the tough guy is gay. You're like, what? Come on. It starts to get a little bit too obvious. You're trying to win an argument by strategic placing, but it's why it happened. It changed attitudes dramatically.
I think it was definitely a big part of that. But my point to that is, look what's happened since then. The world hasn't ended. In fact, in many ways, it's gotten better. Doesn't it feel better to be more tolerant and to know that people can really be who they are without it crumbling the fabric of society like was preached for so many years? I mean, it's just it's a thing that never needed to be, like slavery or discrimination, segregation. Once we woke up and realized that, hey, maybe the way that we're treating a group of people just because they are different, maybe that's not right. Maybe there's something to that. And people in today's society could never imagine a time where black people would have to drink from their own water fountain, or they couldn't sit at a lunch counter, or they couldn't ride a bus at the front, that they had to give up their seat for a white person. That is unconscionable to people like to our generation, and it should be. It should be abhorrent. It should make you sick to think that that was ever the way that people treated other people in a world or a country like ours. And it's the same thing as we go through time. We look back and we realize that maybe the dogma, and most of this, honestly, not to pick on religion or anything, but most of it stems from that. The Bible is used several times to justify the segregation, the mixing of the yoke. And once we get past that, we realize that, wow, maybe we took a lot of maybe we inflicted a lot of pain on a group of people, and maybe we took a lot from them just because they dared to be different, or just because they didn't look like we did, or just because they didn't love like we love. And I think that no matter how you do it, whether it be through the media or through grassroots movements and protesting, through writing letters, through civil disobedience, through anarchy, any way that you can to introduce that kind of change into society, I defy someone to show me where that's not the way and that's not the right thing to do.
So let me, on playing off of that, let me ask you, because there are two things that happened, and I'm interested in your take. First of all, once upon a time, the religious right was not actually a thing. If you go back to the Jimmy Carter era, people,
sure.
you know who Michelle Bachmann is, right?
Of course I do, and I know exactly where the religious right came from.
From the moral majority, from what's his face, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Roger Ailes.
Oh, wait. Were Roger Ailes back then, or Roger Ailes from because of Fox News?
Roger Ailes from Fox News, but when he worked on the abortion campaigns, when that abortion decision was made on, they saw an opportunity to really clump together in a collective to try to push back against this abortion thing. He was a strategist in that entire
right. That's what I thought you meant. So in Michelle Bachmann in the 70s was in 76 worked on Jimmy Carter's campaign. He was a famously born again Christian. A lot of people don't know that, because he's a Democrat. The liberal Democrat wouldn't even perceive of it that way. That's when what's that?
Back then they would. Back then, even the Democrats. Back then, even the Democrats had to be. If you seem to falter in your belief or devotion to God, there's no way you would ever have a chance in hell. So, of course, yes, people like Jimmy Carter and John F. Kennedy, the proud Catholic.
Right. Exactly.
Times you had to cling on to that. Absolutely.
Right, exactly. And then as a political movement, the religious right gained power. And, there was a lot of cross-pollination between the idea of being Christian and being in the right. And those don't necessarily go hand in hand. That's part of a social movement rather than, an actual, I've analyzed the Bible and now I should be Republican. The question I was going to ask you is, how does your grandmother? Remember, you said your grandmother is the perfect example of what you would, if you had a role model Christian said this is how a Christian should act. You mentioned her. How does she deal with these type of things? What would Granny do when she's faced with these challenging social questions? In terms of, you said, Granny, I'm gay. What would Granny do? So that's nice, dear. I'll bake you some food. What did she do?
I did tell Granny that I was gay, and her response to me was, "No wonder you always commented on my dresses."